The following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local community-centered journalism today by signing up to be a monthly sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. It doesn't take much money to support local news.
Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. I'm Joe Pugh. From speeding up adoption of the zero-carbon step code to a contentious alternative approval process, there's plenty to look back on in municipal politics this year. Nanaimo Mayor Leonard Krog stopped by the CHLY studio to help wrap up 2023. We're going to bring you that conversation in two parts this week, and we're going to start right now. What is going to stand out to you when you remember this year?
I think in a very general sense, it feels like it did before COVID. The town is back, so to speak. Things are happening. My calendar is often filled with conflicting venues and dates. One evening, I'm neither complaining nor bragging. I had 4 different events to attend and say a few words at and or get a meal on a Saturday night a few weeks back. And that indicates to me we're back to where we were. I remember saying to my council after I was elected in 2018 and COVID started and we were into it for a couple of months, I said to them, you do realize you're living through a unique time where this job and referencing their position as councillors is going to be pretty slack in comparison to what it normally is for local politicians or politicians generally. You're going to have free time on weekends and evenings that otherwise wouldn't normally be the case. And so I can happily say things are back. The festivals are back. The organizations are up and running. As much as we still have in this community a core of poverty that is always disturbing, at the same time, unemployment is still very low. The wages may not be satisfactory when you're meeting the inflationary cost of groceries and whatnot, although the price of gas is down. That's a blessing for some folks. Nevertheless, I'd say we're back. So I think we're ending the year on a positive note. We've seen significant growth again this year, not as much as our banner year last year or a few years before, but still people have discovered the east coast of Vancouver Island. And candidly, if any of your listeners have had much chance to travel, is there a better place in the world to live? The peaceable kingdom of Canada and a town that's still quite livable. Yes, we've got things to improve, but a wonderful park system on the water. Come on, does it get any better than this? Merry Christmas, everyone.
So this was the first year for a new council, albeit one largely unchanged from the previous term. Yes. How have things been at the council table this year?
Look, Nanaimo's been very lucky the last couple of councils. And I say this publicly, my poor predecessor, Bill McKay, who I happened to run into last night at an event at the Legion, he faced a real challenge with very challenging councillors, a very divided council, a very challenging CAO, a reputation across this country that garnered attention in a very negative way is the politest thing I can say. So I've been very fortunate. Council works well. They're very respectful. They read the material. They pay attention. Nanaimo's well served. And yes, do we divide and disagree on issues? Absolutely. But it's not what I will call serious or life-threatening or nobody's swearing at each other and no untoward behavior that would embarrass. The worst behavior has come from some folks in the audience on occasion who have strong views about various things. But even then, it's been pretty mild stuff. I haven't had to throw anybody out of council chambers or shut down a meeting or recess it because there was heckling or cheering or whatever the case may be. So all in all, it's a good council. I'm happy with it and working well together, particularly when you consider how other councils do and are functioning in British Columbia. Not every community has what I will call and I'm not going to name any if you're going to ask as a good journalist, but no, I'm not going to name any. There are other communities that have some real challenges where the mayor and or some councillors are isolated from a majority or a minority of councillors are being, how shall I say, ridden a little roughshod over by a mayor and council a majority. So yeah, no, we're lucky here.
Have there been any decisions that you've had to make this year as a council that really stand out to you, either as being particularly challenging or as being things that will have a huge impact on the city's future?
I think one of the most challenging ones was around the step code, the energy code, etc. A majority of council wanted to see it implemented in the city, within the city, and that's only where we have jurisdiction, sooner than what the province was mandating. I think that was very divisive, not well understood by the public. A lot of the public think we were going to take away gas, the ability to use natural gas in their homes that they have now, as opposed to new builds. There's been quite a public backlash. There have been a lot of, mainly form letters recently since. I was in the minority in that one. I still stick to the position. If the province set the rules, I was prepared to go with the province's rules. The majority of council chose to move it up faster, and it's been controversial. On the other hand, it's not going to make that much of a difference in Nanaimo, but it certainly garnered a lot of public interest. But you ask about decisions. It's not so much decisions that stand out for me. It is, and I'm going to get on I hesitate to call it a hobby horse because there's no joy in this. It is the ongoing crisis in our streets around mental health, addictions, trauma, brain injury, homelessness, and the related street disorder, including crime to support addiction. That continues to be the greatest single source of communication with council, emails mainly, but occasionally phone calls, letters. The human misery out there impacts everybody. Start with the people living in the streets. Unless you have really significant mental health issues, and unfortunately a number of people do, living in the streets is not your ideal. And the behaviors that are observed by others who aren't living in the streets are often frightening and disturbing. And so I guess it's fair to say, and I've said it over and over again till I'm almost sick and tired of saying it, people are living in hell in the streets, and in many cases they're making it hell for others. And this is a 21st century democracy. Many European countries do not face these challenges. It all relates back to 30, 40 years of failed social health and health policy, and it's going to take us a while to get out of it. Mercifully, the province is taking steps, but I think for many of us, the pace is not fast enough. Anyways, I don't want to spend the morning talking about that topic. It is frustrating. I won't tell you which of, how shall I say, just someone from the media said to me the other day something to the effect, they were basically tired of asking me questions about this because it seems to be the same thing year after year. And it was in reference in this case to the provision of warming centers, the lack of shelter spaces in our community. Every year this comes, it always goes through, I hate to say it, a sort of similar crisis. What we really need is a province-wide program and standards and funding. God bless Island Health, who stepped up to the plate with $250,000 this week to help pay for the warming centers that the city is providing through three nonprofit groups, the 710 Club Island Crisis Care in Risebridge. But a warming center doesn't fix anything. A shelter doesn't fix anything. Only real housing and supportive programs, and as I've said many times before, secure and voluntary care is going to make a difference for some people. It's not everybody, but some folks are just in the streets because they're poor. They can't afford the market rents that are out there. There isn't enough subsidized or public housing, whatever you want to call it. For many others, there simply isn't the supportive housing they need to either overcome their addiction, or deal with their addiction, get better, or maintain a relatively healthy lifestyle. Because keep in mind, addiction, there are many people who are addicted in our society. Alcoholics who function at work every day, who manage to survive. People with severe drug addictions who teach and can function because they maintain their habit. For others with severe mental health issues, it's a real challenge. But I think something that gets forgotten in this, and even though I say it, I think it's become more and more apparent, we have a significant portion of the population in our streets now who are suffering with brain injury of varying degrees. And some of that may well not be, how shall I say, capable of or able to be fixed, if you will, or remedied or ameliorated, and some kind of significant care is needed. For others, if they had programs, if we had a brain injury society that could hire more people, that could have better and bigger facilities, that could run group homes, whatever the case may be, whatever works, we would be better off. Because there are some folks, as I say, who are not going to get better, some who could, but we haven't devoted the money. And I'm repeating myself. Everybody's heard this a million times, but you brought it up, and so I'm going to. Well, I brought it up. I couldn't resist. I'm going to say it again. Going back to COVID, we found hundreds of billions of dollars, federally and provincially, to deal with COVID. As I always say, rather sarcastically, that money was to pave the potholes in the middle class road of Canadian life. If you were losing your job or your hours were cut, you could get CERB. If you were a small business, you could get $40,000, $10,000 of which you didn't even have to pay back. Nobody, right, left, or center on the political spectrum complained about spending the money to deal with that. And yet we have this ongoing tragedy in our streets that existed before COVID that is now, I would argue, certainly in this community, and I think in most communities indeed across this country, is worse. And I don't see us responding with the same incredible effort to go back, and it's the old man thing, to go back to this country and its attitude towards fighting fascism in the Second World War. We ran up debt without question. I'm not suggesting we run up debt, so don't, all the people worried about taxes, please don't panic here. But we ran up incredible debt because it was necessary, and we saw no other choice. And I guess I'm at the stage of life, and I'm 70 now, and I'm proud of being 70 and happy to live here and very grateful for everything. But I just think it is high time we made a significant commitment to fix this. Because as I say, nobody's happy. It's not going to get better on its own. People who have the combination of the things I've talked about in particular are not going to have an epiphany and suddenly decide to get treatment or care or whatever. There are too many, and the frontline people who work, whether it's the RCMP, the ACT teams, the paramedics, the firefighters, the nurses, the doctors, the folks who are trying to help and assist and deal with these challenges, they're getting tired, and the rate of people who are off on medical or stress leave is significant. It was just repeated last night when the acting superintendent of the RCMP here, Mr. Burton, God bless him, fine fellow, talked about it last night at a gathering for citizens on patrol. It is a reality. But now, we got to talk about something positive.
Well, as you described there are so many kind of overlapping factors contributing to this. One thing that's come up in the news recently this week is that Nanaimo has twice the rate of toxic drug overdoses as the rest of the island. Certainly a lot of the issues you were describing there seem to be maybe more chronic on a per capita basis in Nanaimo than other places in the province, even though most communities are dealing with similar issues on some scale. Do you have any idea of why that is?
Oh, look, I think there's a multitude of potential explanations. Firstly, we're a port city. All right, that's how drugs get into countries. They come through ports, right? That's old news. The other thing is we have a significantly high population of people who are unhoused, higher than other communities. In contrast to Vancouver, we do not have the shelter beds, and we do not have the warming facilities. So even giving somebody a place to sleep at night that is safe and secure, you're much less likely to find it here than you are in even Victoria and certainly Vancouver and the surrounding area over there. So we're way behind. And look, it isn't the city's job. It's not municipal government's job to deliver these services and provide them. But we, as a community, we bear the consequence.
Do you think that is a direct result of the fact that, you know, the legislature is in Victoria, there are so many more MLAs who are in Vancouver? Does one play into the other?
Partially, but also, in fairness, the city of Vancouver, and I would argue unwisely from a governance perspective, for many years has committed a great deal of money to housing and programs that are absolutely in my respectful opinion, within the jurisdiction of the provincial government, which is why they have the taxes they do, and why they have how shall I say more facilities. That is part of it. I'm simply, and I say this with compassion, I'm not prepared to see this city in particular deliver services in a substantive way that are the province's responsibility or the responsibility of the federal government. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't make things any better. It doesn't solve the underlying problems, and municipal governments have neither the legal jurisdiction, the legal responsibility, or the taxation, the resources to provide the kinds of services that are needed in the quantity that are required to deal with this.
This year, though, Nanaimo did launch a new organization, the Systems Planning Organization.
Yes.
I was chatting with some folks from there this week. Have you seen, since that's gotten off the ground in April, March, May, a change in anything?
Not the kinds of changes that one would hope for. The whole concept of the Systems Planning Organization came out of the city's Health and Housing Task Force, co-chaired by Councillors Hemmons and former Councillor Don Bonner. And the concept was, look, of the monies that are coming into the city, whether it's through social assistance, through health care, through social service, whatever, and the work of the nonprofits, that money is not getting the results that one would hope. It's being spent often in an uncoordinated fashion. And I think one of the driving forces behind the Health and Housing Task Force was to make recommendations to see if we could try and coordinate that. So the Systems Planning Organization is fairly fresh, but the expectations are very high. I didn't hear the interview or who you spoke to, but I can tell you the expectations are very high in the community. And I think arguably the fact that Island Health stepped forward this week with money for the warming centres shows me that they're listening as much as they can within the jurisdiction they have and the resources they have, which again come from the provincial government. So I'm hopeful. I think I'm always hopeful. I have become a determined glass half full, not half empty kind of person on this. But some days I will be candid. I not that anyone cares about my emotional state. It gets very wearing and very weary when you see people on the streets, and I passed several this morning who hang around near City Hall and the safe injection site next to City Hall, in terrible condition. Guaranteed they didn't have any place to sleep last night. And I'm not interested in the discussion that someone to have about why they're there and they should pull themselves up out of the street and blah, blah, blah. All I know is there's a lot of suffering. It needs to be fixed. It's the right thing to do. It'll be cheaper in the long run. And we won't have what I would call, from a 21st century democracy's perspective, the embarrassment of such incredible disparity. You know, lovely cars being driven up and down our streets by people who are doing very, very well, a small number, passing by others for whom a good day would be a day when they had a dry place to sleep, as opposed to a wet one.
You're listening to Midcoast Morning. We'll be right back to our year in review with Nanaimo Mayor Leonard Krog.
Midcoast Morning is made possible by the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Support Midcoast Morning and CHLY's nonprofit newsroom today by becoming a sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. Local news can't survive without your support. Another way to help us out is to share this show with your friends and tell them why they should support us. Finally, if you're listening to the podcast edition of Midcoast Morning, go and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast feed you use. It helps people find us.
Now back to our 2023 wrap-up with Nanaimo Mayor Leonard Krog. I also wanted to ask about an issue from the end of this year that could be an issue at the beginning of next year, the alternative approval process to take out the loan to build a new public works yard. What would you like the public to know about this kind of whole issue?
Start from this basic proposition, and I try and use a simile. if your roof on your house is leaking, do you continue to watch it leak and decay and wait until it caves in, so to speak, or do you replace the roof? That's a bit dramatic, but essentially the public works yard and the proposal done in sort of 4 chunks over what will be many years, we're talking about doing something that we have to do. It's a need to do, not a want to do. It is not, as other councillors have said, and as I've said, it's not like the waterfront walkway, which I would love to see extended from Departure Bay Ferry Terminal right to Departure Bay. It's not like a new art gallery, which many would love to have, but which will be expensive. And, arguably we can survive without an art gallery or a public walkway. But I use those examples of things I'd love to see. But this is a need. The buildings are old, they're structurally unsound, you can't even fit equipment that's being worked on in them to be worked on. We have mechanics working out in all kinds of weather. And I can assure you, at Christmas time, if the snowplow's broken down, there'll be calls to City Hall.
Can you give people a sense of what the state of the public works yard is? Maybe even like what the scope of a public works yard is.
The public works yard is where the workers gather, where they're assigned their task. It's where the garbage trucks gather. It's where the trucks that go out and carry people and take them to your neighborhood, where they repair your potholes and do all those kinds of things, do the cleanup. Where staff are organized. I mean, our staff are working out of a bunch of ATCO trailers that were pounded together a very long time ago. I don't mean this too cheekily, but possibly before you were a glint in your father's eye. It's a very old and tired facility, and it was created at a time when the city was a third of its size. I know it's hard for many in Nanaimo when they hear a figure $48 million to build just a portion. But you know what? If you look at construction costs, and I'll come back to the inflation, our tax increase this year is potentially 8%. And people reflect on percentages instead of the dollars. The reality is, for the average home, it's a little over a couple $100. The average priced home in Nanaimo, a couple $100 annually, which I appreciate is no small amount of money if you don't have a couple $100 at the end of the month. But having said that, the cost of construction have risen far more than that. As I repeat over and over again, the city of Nanaimo doesn't buy a lot of groceries, okay? Seriously, we don't go into, overweighty and be looking at the price of asparagus or cauliflower or carrots. But we buy a lot of pipe and a lot of concrete. And we have to hire contractors to do a lot of the construction work. And their prices are up. Wages have gone up significantly, and so they should. It's tough work. That means we are facing challenges too, but that work has to get done. And we need a facility that functions well, that if there is a crisis, just as an example, it's not the only reason, but it is certainly one reason. If there is a crisis, if there is an earthquake, and those buildings collapse and we don't have access to the equipment to try and restore, how shall I say, just basic things in the city, roads, whatever, people will really be shocked and they'll be blaming the horrible council that never did anything about this.
So there's two pieces to this, right? There is the loan to build the public's work yard, and then there is the alternative approval process.
Yes.
The idea that, a certain amount of people are going to need to go and submit that they're not in favor of this, and if a certain threshold is reached, it becomes a referendum. That process already happened. There was an issue with notification, and so it will happen again. What would you like people to know about that part?
Look, I would say the reason the alternative approval process exists legislatively, and it's not a city bylaw, it exists legislatively, created by the province of British Columbia, that creates the right, if you will, of municipal governments to exist, is there, and it's designed specifically for these kinds of projects where, look, you're really going to oppose putting a new roof on your house, to come back to my analogy? No, we're not going to go to a probably more now, $300,000 or $400,000 expense of a full referendum where you have people coming in and voting and coming in person, driving in their cars to get to the polling station, etc. We're saying, look, no one should really be opposed to this. Council's looked at it. Staff have recommended it. It's been on the books for years. So have an alternative approval process where if people are really that upset and think it's that awful, then 10% of them are going to have to not. They don't even have to come out. What they have to do is print a form off their computer that's available on the city website in the simplest one, print it off, and then mail it into City Hall, and they've got 30 plus days, I forget the exact number, to do that. Or if they get the form and drop it off at City Hall. It's not an onerous proposition. And there's no big secrets here, and the information's been before council, public for a long time. Information's available on the city website. If people really think we can carry on with our existing structures into the future without replacing them, then I just say to them, you're dead wrong. And the point of the alternative approval process is that by authorizing the borrowing, if you will, then you can spread the cost out over time. So it's not just taxpayers for the next 3 or 4 years we have to raise taxes significantly to pay for something. I mean, who in the modern world goes out and tries to buy and pay off a house in 3 or 4 years? You can't. You don't. It doesn't make sense because you're going to be using that house for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Think of this the same way. We're amortizing a very necessary part of city infrastructure over time.
That's Nanaimo Mayor Leonard Krog speaking with me at the CHLY studio to help wrap up 2023. Tune in this Friday for part 2 of our conversation. That's it for now, though. Thank you for joining me. I'm Joe Pugh, host and producer of Midcoast Morning. Jesse Woodward is our executive producer, and Arby Frew is our technical advisor. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band Waste Management. You can find more of their music on their Bandcamp. If you have a story you'd like us to cover, email us at news@chly.ca. Bye for now. Let's talk again Friday.
Midcoast Morning would not be possible without the funding of the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Midcoast Morning is a project of CHLY's nonprofit newsroom. Support nonprofit journalism in Nanaimo and on the Salish Sea today by becoming a monthly sustaining donor at $5 or more per month. Support the program at chly.ca/donate. If you're already a supporter, record a voice memo telling others where you're listening from and why they too should support our work. After you're done, you can email it to us. Also, share the podcast with your friends. While Meta is blocking Canadian users from sharing news content on their Facebook feeds, you can still share our podcast directly with your friends via Facebook or Instagram Messenger. Finally, this program acknowledges and gives thanks to the Nanaimo First Nation as we broadcast and podcast from their traditional territory. Thanks for listening.